Only smart people get up early enough to listen to the Francene Marie show. So thanks for listening, Smarty Pants.
Oi, Billy! Oscar! Dave! Get up! Francene Marie show's on!
Good morning. Thanks for joining us. We have to do more mental health shows because a lot of us are feeling off balance. It's not our fault. The world is just moving so fast right now. Or has it all along and we're just now noticing it? The overwhelming feeling that you're not living your fullest potential or you have a lot of shouldas and couldas in your life, keep listening because we scored Kern Frost for this interview. How does your brain work? Let's find out. Good morning.
Good morning, Fran. It's nice to be on the show, and thank you very much for inviting me here.
I always interview local, regional folks, but never people across the pond with a world view. Tell us about our brain. How does it work?
You rightly say I'm across the pond. I'm in Zurich. I've run a clinic here for too many years to mention now. And also back in London, I got into hypnosis and cognitive behavioral therapy, as well as a number of different things. But my big passion, big interest was what we were told when we were kids, which was, we only use 5% of the brain. And I was going, well, speak for yourself. I've definitely got 95% to go in. I wanted to research that and I wanted to go further and further. And a lot of people were looking at neurolinguistic programming and hypnosis on how to get further. But I felt there was a whole new subject that you could go into, especially with the revelations of neuroscience. And so when we start to look at the mind, the first question, if you want to expand your mind, is do you think you can? It's almost accepting that you can be more than you are, and then really assessing or really becoming aware of why you think the way you do. And this is, we call it the science of the unknown universe. It's a whole big subject. It's very much about how you can start to think quicker, critically think, creatively problem solve, empathetic understanding, as well as co-creating. And really, it's all about increasing communication, confidence, and creativity, and having something called agile thinking, which is hemispheric synchronization or flow state. So there's an introduction for you on that one.
When you think about the household that you were brought up in, do we start thinking like them? When do we start thinking independently?
There was a guy in America called Dr. George Land and Dr. Beth Jarman, and they did a study for NASA years ago, back in 95, and they realized that children of the age of 5 had a genius level of innovative creative capacity, 98% of them. And they did a research with over 1,200 children to find this. And what happens is we've got this wonderful theta brainwave in the early years that allows us to be completely innovative. And if you watch little children, they play in their own way. They become a dead fly on the floor and all these sorts of things. And then once they hit sort of 5, school comes in, being responsible, little adult, don't do this, don't say that, don't talk back. And suddenly all that innovation is starting to get squashed. And by the time someone's 31, only about 2% of the population actually have that genius left. It's suppressed massively down. So there's a lot of factors, what the parents say, unconscious programming, lots of things that we're exposed to in society about identification. So it becomes quite complex, but the ultimate result is we slowly think slower and slower. And that's a bit of a sad situation for humanity at the moment.
Can we get our genius back?
Well, that comes up to that question I started with is, do you think you want to? And do you think you can? Because if you think you can, then you can. And if you think you can't, you can't. And believe you me, there are people out there that go, if you say to them, would you like to have 10 times the level of creativity you've got right now? They'll go, oh, I don't want that. I don't know what I'd do with it. They actually argue to think, they say, I've got too many thoughts as it is, so I want to have less of them. And really what we look at is then the person's mind's got something which is called mind static, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of thoughts, but they're just not strategic. So they find their brains are working too fast all the time with no real effect. So what you've got is like an engine revving, but it's just got nowhere to go. So really what we're very focused on is strategic thinking, so someone can start to think their future out. They can idealize, they can imagineer, they can emotioneer, they can manifest, all the things that you might talk about with the law of attraction. We bring that into a scientific understanding of the neuroplasticity of the mind and the connection with the universe. So it's very much taking it stage by stage. But the first step is someone has to decide that they want more from life. They're not, and they've got to be truthful about it to themselves. And if they do that, then they can grow.
When we're on the hamster wheel, right, from childhood to teenhood to young adulthood to having babies and, doing the whole 9 yards, everything gets diluted and we do feel overwhelmed. So we have stinking thinking versus strategic thinking.
I love that term, stinking thinking.
It's at home, it's at work. So all we have to do is decide, I have more than I'm working with.
If we go back to the brain itself, the brain is a changeable structure, just like a muscle. If you take a muscle to the gym, it's going to grow if you exercise it in the right way. It's exactly the same as the brain. The brain's neuroplasticity, the structure, the synapses, they all can change based on what you do with your mind. And there are a couple of things that straight away people can do to help their brains expand what we call a bandwidth, because most people tend to think in the old educational, oh, are you stupid, or you're dumber than me, or are you brighter than me, and all that sort of stuff. But we think in bandwidth, because frequency of what the brain is operating, because all our brains are massively powerful. Our unconscious works at something like 40 million bits of data per second. But the bit that's listening to me right now within you or the listeners is about 40 bits of data per second. So most people are trying to navigate life through the 40 bits rather than utilize the unconscious mind at 40 million bits. And this is where the growth can come. And believe you me, the growth is massive in someone's mind. Doesn't matter who you are, doesn't matter what your background is, doesn't matter what you've done or where you've been. The only criteria is that you want to be more than you are right now. And that's really where it starts.
I can hear a script going through people's heads right now. I want to make more money. I want. We do that. I want. And then we're going, why don't I have it?
Well, the question is, a lot of people go through life and they go, oh, I should have this, I should have that. My friends down the road, they've got this, they've got that. Why haven't I got this? And why haven't I got that? Why is the universe so nasty to me? And all this rubbish that they come out with. But that is what we call mind static. That's the negative programming, because when you listen to the way they phrase their language patterns, most of it's in a negative polarity. So really, if you go, okay, if you're in a negative polarity, then you absorb energy. Okay, you can't create. If you look at a battery on a car, it brings in, the energy. It's a negative polarity. It doesn't make anything from the negative terminal. It's the positive terminal that pushes out the energy. And if we want to start to be more than we are, we've got to really identify that we are energetic beings and start to manifest the positive energy. And then we start to use wisdom, which is our capacity to think, to start to work with the language patterns and the thought patterns to actually manifest what we want. So in terms of an average person, we use 15 to 16,000 words a day. I think men 15, women 16,000. And there's about 600 primary programming language patterns that affect the unconscious mind. Not particularly 600, don't count them. But that means that we identify, just listen to people, and you'll want to do this when you go out after this conversation. You'll listen to people and they'll go, I'm not this, we can't this, we shouldn't, it isn't, I'm not. And you'll notice that these patterns are repeated. And when they say, I can't do this, then they're sending a direct instruction to the unconscious mind at 40 million bits of data per second to manifest that reality. So they've actually created their own reality. It's nothing to do with the universe at this level. I can remember sitting by Zurich Lake a couple of years ago and listening to this girl. She's about 33. I just listened to her for about 5 minutes. She was speaking English, and it's a bit of an earwigging, but I listened to about 30 different rules that she made for herself that were all within the negative limiting energetic field that were directly programming her mind to create the reality she was experiencing. And because your brain is a supercomputer, and if you don't learn the programming language of mind, how can you possibly program it? Very difficult for people. But very easy to learn. And once they do, they go, well, yeah, I am a bit negative, aren't I? And most of what I say is fairly self-defeating, isn't it? Then you start to open up the gates, and then you're starting to take the very first step of re-identifying yourself. And what I mean by that is most people are living an identity that they've absorbed and adopted. They're conforming.
Okay, the $1 million question is, what's more powerful, the unconscious mind or the conscious mind?
Well, the unconscious mind is infinitely more powerful. As I said, 40 bits of data to 40 million bits. The unconscious mind, if you look at brainwaves, for example, which is the neuroscience coming in here, because when we teach people the programs that we run, we're talking about psychology, philosophy, theology, quantum physics, spirituality, metaphysics. All these subjects are part of the holistic experience, and we have to address all of them to get a brain to grow. So when we look at the conscious mind, we're saying, well, the person is living within a reality that they've adopted over the years, and it's unconsciously adopted. Then we start to say, okay, let's become the creator and the architect of our lives from this moment forward. And we have to start at the 0 point. We've got to say, okay, no more backstory, no more mind static. Let's just go from 0 and start creating the identity we want. And that means there's a shift from the A identity, we call the identity avatar, to the B identity, which is the better person you always wanted to be. And it's not so difficult. It's actually quite easy.
To get off this conveyor belt, man, I'm telling you, the programming and conditioning that has been done to us, it's no wonder why we're burnt out. And then put a pandemic on top of it. We're like, it hurts. If you're just now tuning in, we got a new best friend. It's Kern Frost. We're talking about your brain. Why do we always have more negative thoughts than positive?
Okay, that's because we're living in a negatively polarized frequency world where everything is in the extreme of negativity. You only have to look at the news, you have to look at your friends, you look at the people talking on the TV, you look at the dramas, the films. It's all highly negative information that we're absorbing all the time. That is a problem to us as where we are in social growth at the moment, because we're at that extreme end, and there's something called toxic stress that we're exposed to. And toxic stress your parents or my parents wouldn't really have had. And that is because they would have lived a much simpler kind of life. But we have Facebook likes, we have what people think of us, we're exposed to, what we call universal dynamics, which is the world situation. And we're taking all this information on all day long. My parents would have had 3 channels that were black and white. They didn't really care about anything. We, on the other hand, have so much exposure to negativity that this creates toxic stress in the brain. And if we trace it back just before COVID, there's terrorism, there's global change. All of these things make us in fear. And in fear, the brainwave moves from the neocortex through the limbic system down into the stem of the brain. And in the stem of the brain, if the lights are shining down there, then there isn't a lot of illumination. It's just, you can't think your way out of a box. You just very much brain fog, no creativity. So very important to stop being in a fear mindset, because your thinking will start to become creative again, because it will move to the neocortex. So we are representative of an age where toxic stress is actually causing the destruction of the finer synapses in the brain. And that means that everyone you know has got brain damage now. And that's a progressive situation. Since the Second World War, cognitive function of a human being has gone down 2 points every decade. So we are probably, I hate to say it, probably the thickest humans have ever lived, but we think we're the brightest. It's a real irony.
You mentioned synapses. I remember watching a GMO show, and they're saying, well, if you drink all this soda, it kind of messes with your synapses, right? If you eat certain things and drink certain things, it messes with your brain.
Yes, it does mess with your brain. I mean, I opened a conference here in Zurich in 2018, which was a psychedelic conference. There was about 600 people. Now, for me, I've never taken a single drug in my life, psychedelics or otherwise, because I look at the brain as a highly tuned, amazing mechanism that if you ingest, and there's a number of things that you can really affect the way your brain functions. And the first is what you ingest, as I said, what you drink, what you put in your mouth, the drugs that you use. And a lot of people talk on psychedelics, they go, oh, I can think quicker. But when you're talking to them, they're not. They're actually a lot slower. And you go, but they're convinced that they're quicker. And you go, okay. So you look at this position where you've got to really watch what you're eating. There's a lot of genetically modified food. There's a lot of chemicals, and your brain is reacting to that as immediately it goes into your body. So be careful on what you're eating. The other thing that changes the way your brain works is structure. So if you get a bang on the head, it can change the structure, and that means that your brain will start to repair the damage with other parts of the brain. So this is another reason of how the neuroplasticity changes. But the most important one for people who want to grow their minds is function, intention, and environment. What you want your brain to do and achieve is fundamental. If you don't have a destination path, your brain doesn't know what to do, and it will just go all around in circles. If you ask your brain to do things that are going to grow it, then it's going to grow. If you just don't care, it's not going to do anything. It's going to atrophy like a muscle. And the other one is environment. Very important. If you surround yourself with people who want to grow their minds, then you will start, because we as human beings grow within our communities, our social relationships. If you're surrounding yourself with people who moan all day, they're negative, all these sorts of things, then your brain is just going to get smaller and smaller. So neuroplasticity goes both ways. It goes smaller and it goes larger. It's just our choice which one we want.
That reminded me of people who are sitting in the parking lot not wanting to go in the office because of the toxicity, right? Mm-hmm. And it reminds me of family gatherings. People don't want to go because they know immediately they're going to be attacked. But let's go into the impact of AI. Because we're talking about the biggest, best computer is our brain. What we think the computers are.
Yeah, this is a little bit of a problem for humanity, especially when it comes to its survival of the next 10 years. Our self-identification is so bad that we only identify within limitation. And what I mean by that is that when I used to do hypnosis, people used to come in and they'd come in and they'd moan about, no one ever used to come to my clinic to be happy with me. They were always miserable, you know. That's why I moved into mental acceleration, because it's more fun. But they would come in and they would self-identify through limitation with the language patterns. And then in trance, they would have none of this limitation. They would be musical, they might be poetic, artistic. And then when you came out of the trance, then they would return back to the limiting identity, which was in the ascendancy. So we as human beings actually physically self-identify as very negative situations. And a lot of us are waking up and going, well, I can't stand this anymore. It's just negative all around me. This is why it's fundamental for you to, you know, if you're in a workplace that's making you unhappy, get out. If you're in a family that's making you happy, put some distance. And I know people will go, well, when I go on the consciousness path, I tend to lose all my friends and I tend to lose all the people I used to know. But I'm afraid that's the price you pay, because one is the way you think is sort of connected to the outside world. Your outside world is a projection of your inside world, so the two work together. So to change the way you think, you've got to start to manage where you are and stop being a victim to other people. If your boss is victimizing you, get out. If your family is victimizing you, get out. You can always come back in some other frame because you've got the power, but at the moment your energy is drawn so far down, you're just a victim. You don't want to be a victim. You don't want to be a passenger. You want to be a driver in life and have some fun. Much, much more fun. Super cool.
Oh, I love it. I love it. Are we a passenger in our life, the driver, or the victim? Yes.
Funny enough, we're the same. We're all three at the same time, because I certainly know if I go and see my mum, she's going to victimize me because she presses all my buttons she's known for years. You know what I mean? And then if I go and see, someone who was, in a relationship, for example, I was was very much a passenger in the relationship, just going along. But in the work that I do, I'm very much the driver. In other words, I'm the driving force behind things. So we all have those identification. Really, if you want to accelerate the mind, you've got to try to manage your world, manage your relationships. So you're starting to move, even with my mother. Okay, I've taken a position now very much where I am now the driver in that situation. I stopped being the victim of her unconscious needs. And this is a subject that we come onto, which is the unconscious mind. Most people are asleep. They are not thinking at all. They're going along a pattern, which is unconscious patterns working in the background. And that isn't a way to live. It's not a way. And they're doing jobs that they don't like, living lives that they're trying to get over through Netflix. It's very, very difficult for them.
If I just watch a good movie, I'll get over it. If you just not tuning in, we've got the man here. What title can I give you? Because I've seen you in several circles and I'm like, okay, what is he? Your truth
I
teller.
don't have a title. I run a clinic here in Zurich. Someone might call me a therapist. Someone might call me a psychologist. But coming back to your question about AI, I mean, I don't just do the therapy side. I run something called the Council for Human Development, which is a Swiss non-for-profit based out of Switzerland. And we train people all over the world in something called consciousness change therapy. And what we do is we enlighten them to the understanding of what's going to happen in the next 10 years, especially in our relationship to AI. And people don't like it, I will agree. But what we say to them is, look, AI is rapidly accelerating. Most jobs, even here in Switzerland, all the banks, they're losing people. I think Deutsche Bank before COVID let go 18,000 people, HSBC 25,000 people. Huge numbers of people are being let go, but people aren't aware of it. It's not publicized, but masses of people are coming out of work who are senior people. Even the bank directors here are afraid for their jobs. They're actually learning Chinese in case they get made redundant. And it's quite an amazing world when you step into it, because most people are completely oblivious to it. And they go, no, AI won't be around for it. But if you go into AI, you'll know that most of the jobs that we currently do are currently replaceable by an automatic system, because the work that we do is all process left-brained, which means it's always got an A plus B plus C kind of situation to it. Whereas when we start to look at what if you came out of work, what would the future be? If AI was doing all the process jobs, what would you do? And people don't have a sense of what that might be because they've got their CV. So what we do is we teach them that their brains have this infinite capacity for creative work. And I'm not talking about doing a picture. I'm talking about creative problem solving. And corporations at the moment, what they're crying out for is innovative thinking, entrepreneurship, co-creation, critical thinking, creative problem solving. This is what we train people in. And this is the future, because if you take a person and think, well, what are they going to do in the future? They can't do any of these process roles because they're all going to be replaced. There ain't going to be any new work in the process roles because they're immediately replaced by AI, and that's accelerating. So really what we as humans have that we've kind of forgotten is something called hemispheric synchronization, and it's the movement from what we call T1 to T2 to T3 thinking. T1 is convergent left brain, which is what the education and employment system wanted us to do. T2 is divergent thinking, where we've just got loads of creativity but don't know what to do with it. And then T3 is hemispheric synchronization, where we start to go into a strategic flow state. And this is what Silicon Valley are very keen on at the moment, because once you're in a flow state, it's called the gamma brainwave and the theta brainwave, means you go immensely creative. You go into a super creative state, just like you all do when you're dreaming. When you're just waking up, you've got all those masses of dreams. Now, if you can bring that creativity into your waking state, then you've got a partnership with AI. And that's the brilliant future for humanity. Because once we start to wake up to this and realize that we've just been using a fraction of our minds, we've now become the creative visionaries of the future. And AI will be our partner, providing the process to manifest it. And to give you an example of that, if you ever watched Star Trek, and there's kind of like these robots creating a big old enterprise in the atmosphere, and it's all being done. Well, just think of that. We don't have to do those jobs anymore, but we just have this amazing creativity that AI can't replace. And that's our future. But unless we develop it, I'm afraid it's not a good future.
So it's not going to be dinosaurs that take us out. It's going to be artificial intelligence.
I think the dinosaurs actually had died 62 million years ago, although they're trying to bring them back, aren't they, with Jurassic Park. Look, the world's going to change massively. One of the things that I want to express to people is the world is going to change massively beyond our comprehension in the next 10 years. We're going to have the metaverse. We're going to have technology. We're going to have the way that everything we understand and live and love or feel connected to is going to change in the next 10 years. And that is going to cause quite a lot of mental difficulties for people, because their brain frequency or bandwidth is just not big enough to be able to cope with the challenges that they're going to meet. So this is why mental development, mental health care is very important right now. And why we're having a lot of mental problems is because the brain frequency can't cope with the challenges that it's asked to do. Most of the mental health problems I've experienced in Zurich over the years has not been because the person's ill. It's because they've got the symptoms of a sick society and they can't rationalize it. You've got internal conflict, and they will have depression, anxiety, self-harming, suicide, all because they can't quite put together what society is as a structure. because it doesn't make sense at its core. And what we're starting to see in society at the moment is still this becoming a big scale problem. But as we move into things like the metaverse, where people are asked to think in a completely different way, they just don't have the agile thinking to be able to do it. And that is why what we do as an organization is we see it as a mission to literally save humanity from its own demise, because it just can't think big enough. But all of us can, if we change the dynamics of what we're doing and understand how the brain works and the brain waves and how we can exercise this. And to start it, I'd say to you, just learn to smile a bit more. If you smile a bit more, you're going to be happier. And people are going to think you're an idiot, of course. But what are you smiling about, you dirty person? What have you got to be happy about? We need to be miserable like us, that kind of thing. But if you start smiling, and then also talk to strangers, your brain goes into a different frequency when you're talking to strangers, not the people you know. Because if you imagine back 30,000 years ago when you met a stranger in the woods, they might, befriend you or kill you. So your brain has to be operating at a higher frequency to see what's going on, the hand movements, the eye movements, all these things. So it starts to go quicker. Now, the more you talk to strangers, the more your brain is going to adapt and the neuroplasticity is going to change. And you're going to find these increases in creativity, which are natural to the brain. So it's a real interesting subject for anyone to get into, improve their relationships, improve their businesses, improve their prospects and their happiness. Most importantly, happiness.
Neuroplasty, my interpretation of it means that we can expand and grow the mind.
Correct.
Period.
Yeah, well, I wouldn't want to. When I first got onto this, I'll give you my own little bit of story on consciousness and consciousness acceleration. I was watching the Matrix movie, and the Wachowski brothers of the time, they're now the Wachowski sisters, but, the Wachowski brothers wrote the movie, and off of a French author who wrote a book about, that particular subject. And I thought at the time, crikey, these people can think so much better than me. They're so much more creative. Why can't I do that? Why did I get at the end and the back of the queue when brains were being handed out? What's this? I'm kind of sentimental about it, but what's this bloody brain doing? It's just useless. But then I was listening to myself and I thought, well, actually, you're telling yourself you can't do stuff. And I could remember this voice in my head, which was a guy called Jim Shellcross, who was my English teacher. And he said of my essays that they were bamboo babble and chimpanzee chatter. And I thought, that was still running in my head at the age of 38, these words, And so I wanted to write a book. And I thought, who's going to read it? Is it going to be any good? Why do I have the right to write a book? And why do I have the right to think that I might have something worth saying? Do you know what I mean? That's what goes through your head. And with the Matrix, I thought, well, maybe I can think in a different way. And I was playing with the idea, and then, the universe tends to give you the answer to the question that you're asking, if you're prepared to see it and look out for it. And I just read The Master Key by Charles F. Hunnell about quietening the brain and looking at what's going on. And the film came to my mind, which was called Amadeus, which was about Mozart. And the actor in that was writing music quicker than I could think. And I thought, well, he was a child genius, but what's the difference between my brain and the child genius? Because Mozart in real life was playing for kings when he was 5. And I'm thinking, well, I wasn't doing that sort of stuff. I was just playing with toys. And you go, okay, so what was he doing? Now, when I looked at the film, I could see him writing quicker than anyone could think. So he wasn't actually thinking. I know it was a film, but it gave me the idea at the time that just maybe if I stopped thinking, maybe my thinking might start. And instead of having all the static and all the self-limiting thoughts, maybe if I just gave up on those for a second and just let the unconscious mind do the work. And I didn't know anything about hemispheric synchronization, flow state, or brainwaves at the time. This was back in about 2006, I think it was, probably something there. And I just started I wanted to write a particular book at the time, and I remember writing the book in 3 days, just by stopping thinking, and it worked. And then I thought, okay, that's a trick. That doesn't make sense. That's silly. That's not what they told me at school. And then I thought, okay, I'll write a screenplay. And an idea popped in my head called Fat Man, and it was about a superhero. And I was in Dubai, and in 7 days I wrote an entire 30,000 word script, and I thought, okay, maybe there's more in there. Maybe it isn't a trick. And then I wrote a follow-up, which was my first novel, which was over 100,000 words, similar to Harry Potter, which was called Conversations with God, Satan and Tom Cruise, which is a highly complex novel of the ilk of The Matrix. So just by re-identifying how I thought within a space of 2 or 3 months of going from a position of thinking, well, I'm just a dummy here, to being able to replicate and write something as complex as The Matrix in a novel form, and then a trilogy onto that. So once you let the brain go, it doesn't want to stop. You sometimes go, well, you just shut up, because you're just creating so much stuff now. And I've written 20 books since then. So it's just, I think it's nearly 1.5 million words. And, you can talk forever. You can go on stage without preparation. None of this preparation. You don't need to do it. The brain will do all the work for you. You never have to do a single thing. It's in gamma and theta brainwave. And it's not about meditation. I never meditate. It's more about just starting to go, I want to go this direction. And then you suddenly find your unconscious mind. We call it the experiential learning bank, which is all the wisdom of your life. Not the information, but the overall wisdom feeling, the knowledge of the decisions that you've many, many times made. That allows you to navigate decision-making in a fraction of a second. And then you also download from the quantum field, and many literary people will explain this to you, that you suddenly get insight and downloads from the quantum field that are quite amazing. And you can get a whole book in half an hour. And it's just super creative states that you're getting into. And that is nothing to do with drugs. Seriously, children, don't take those drugs. Uncle Kern will tell you, don't take those drugs now. Regardless of what, and don't sell them either. So once you get into this state, life becomes a joy, because every day you get up, you've just got masses of ideas, creativity, and energy goes through the roof. I'm 59, so I've just got masses of energy now that I didn't have when I was 40. It just gets more and more and more. Your brain thinks quicker and quicker, and you just become kind of having fun, really. Fun. F-U-N. Best idea.
Fun. F-U-N. Okay. If folks, I know they're like, what? Where's Kern? Kern is across the pond. Kern Frost. He's our new best friend this morning. Go to counselforhumandevelopment.org, counselforhumandevelopment.org. And the next website is co-createabetterworld.org.
There's something in flow state where you live your life in flow. Most people are trying to be in the left brain, try to work it out, try to find somebody who knows the answers if you don't know the answers, and you're always subservient to somebody. When you move your thinking into flow state, you're allowing the universe to direct your life all the time. That means you've become subservient to a new master. You're kind of either a slave to the system, which isn't good for your health, or you're subservient to the universe, which is expansive and wants you to be part of that. And it's a much better way of living. So really what happens is it's giving you opportunities, so you don't have to think about anything. So Co-Create a Better World came from just someone I was sitting with, and they said, well, we need to talk to people who want to co-create a better world. And I said, that's a good title. Let's give it a go with that then. And it's just like, you don't have to think about anything. I can't tell you how wonderful it is. I do a recording, which is Science of the Unknown Universe, and I've done, I think, 60 modules on that. It's about 30 hours of recording. But you never think about anything before you do it. You let that mind of yours, which is a supercomputer, do the work. And a lot of people keep going, no, but I need to do this. I need to think about it first, otherwise I won't be confident. And you just programmed your unconscious mind to be unconfident. Did you hear that? And they go, oh yeah, I didn't notice. And there's a guy called Ben Hawkes who I do a Wake Up podcast with every Monday. It's called The Wake Up. It's on Spotify. And when he first started training in this subject, he was had a lot of suppressed anger. He was ex-military, a lot of difficulties, a lot of psychological issues. And I started teaching him mental acceleration. And he said, well, should we, after a number of months, he said, should we do this podcast? I think it was about 6 months. And he said, I said, sure, let's do it. Because you always say yes to everything when you're in flow state. Everything is a yes. That's another thing you need to learn, to say yes to everything. Not if someone's trying to rob you and say, can I have your wallet? That's not what I mean. I'm talking about saying things that are good opportunities, not bad ones. And he said, and so I can remember he said, we sit down and discuss it. I said, why do we need to discuss it? He said, well, we need to know what to say. I said, we'll know what to say as soon as we start. And he said, will we? I said, yes. If I taught you something, he said, oh, yeah. Yeah, I'm meant to just go into flow state, aren't I? I said, yeah. So we just start and go into flow state. And then he said, the next meeting, he said, yeah, I've just written down all these points. I said, why are you bothering writing down anything before you do this? Because it will come if you just send the intention to your mind and free your thinking from fear, and you've got masses of creativity. And that's the same for all of us. Remember that. I was a failure at school and dyslexic. So if I can do it, anybody can do it.
I love it how you've jump-started your brain because you had good intention. So what I'm getting out of this is that we have to have good intention, but we have to use that imagination. And the imagination has been diluted. We were told, stop daydreaming. This is not good for you. You're an adult. Be an adult. Be responsible. And that squashes imagination, right? The possibility.
Ooh. Yeah, I mean, the possibilities are infinite. I mean, remember at school I said genius level when you're 5, but by the time you're 15 or 16, you're going to what? 1 hour a week as far as art is concerned, as creative. Everything else is process left brain. And if you're good at that, then you're going to become a doctor or a lawyer and get on well with life because you're very good at retaining information. But IQ is only 20% of success. It really is. It's hardly worth anything. The real things you want to concentrate on is PQ, which is potential quota, which is any one person at any time has got, either an infinite amount of potential because they determine it, or they've got a limited potential. So if you want to go ahead, you've got to try to gauge your thoughts and become, much more positive, much more open, much more free thinking. EQ, which is empathetic quota, you've got to start to feel other people in a much more powerful way, step into their shoes, not just in the old term, but really imagineer and emotioneer what it's like to be them. And this will grow your imagination. A lot of people have no imagination because it's been kicked out of them. And if you want to, manifest the future, you've got to learn the art of emotioneering and imagineering and manifestation. Really important.
Ooh, okay. I know I've only got about 10 more minutes with you. Are you good?
Yeah, I'm cool.
Okay. What are the 3 states? Say those again, because we're going to talk about memory after this, because I couldn't remember the 3 states. There's a flow state. What else? What other ones?
Okay, so we've got if we go through some of the technical stuff, then people can understand it from that position. Okay, so you've got T3 thinking, left brain convergent. You've got T2 thinking, right brain divergent. And then you've got hemispheric synchronization, where the 2 sides of the brain are starting to work to a intention that you've dropped into the mind. So it's a bit like dropping an intention into a computer, i.e. could the computer do this? And it will do it if you allow it to do so. Okay, then you can look at how you're going to, your brain is working. Are you thinking in what's called alpha, beta, delta, theta, or gamma thought? Now, alpha is like when you get out of bed and you've got to clean your teeth and you're sort of doing a bit of daydreaming. Beta is when you're going to the train and you're thinking, shall I get there or not? Kind of basic problem solving. And then gamma is very much where you're going into much more highly creative states, problem solving. And the more you spend time in gamma, the more your brain will grow into gamma. Okay, so you've got to be in a community that does it, as I said. So you've got function, intention, and environment that you need to focus on. Now, delta is really very much when you're sleeping in a deeper sleep, but theta is when you're just before you're waking up and your brain's sort of creating sort of like dreams and stuff like that. I use theta all the time because I know I'm waking up, but I'm consciously going to unconscious myself. So the theta, and drop an intention into my mind at that wakey position where the theta brainwave will solve the problems that I can give it at that moment. Okay, rather than me trying to think it through, because I know that my brain has had sleep and it's now going to go into theta and the waking state, and I can use that theta brainwave there and then by dropping a problem in and saying, what shall I do today that's going to get me this next step further? So if we can get into theta and gamma and practice that, and the only way to do it is through something called polymathic training, which polymathic training is using multiple subjects at the same time to expand the mind. So we will teach a person to talk for 45 minutes on one word without stopping in a flow state. If you go into a corporation and ask an average corporate person to speak on a word for 1 minute, they won't be able to do 30 seconds. But in this, the people we train, they will be able to do it any word for 45 minutes flow state, because they've given up wanting to feel like they can't do something, given up being nervous, being fearful, thinking that people won't like them or think they're stupid. All of this stuff is mind static. Once we've given it up, then the brain is open to grow and do the things that we want. And this is really, really getting into the now. So we're not governed by backstory, as I said, regret, remorse, all these sorts of things. We're not worried about the future of fear, what might happen if this happens, because that's a waste of time. But we're now fully present. And once you're fully present, then you can upload from the experiential learning or wisdom bank and download from the quantum field, and you're in the flow state. And that's a state of super creativity. That's where gamma is, and that's where you need to train your mind to be. And all of you can do it. You just have to want to. But that's the beginning question. Do you want to?
We wake up in the morning and those ruminating thoughts of, I don't want to go to work. I shouldn't have married this person.
Oh God, that's all negative. Nasty. You know, if you think of those thoughts, I mean, just to give you an analogy, you know, a lot of people have a voice in their head that says, you could have said this, you could have done that, you should have did this. And it's a real nasty voice a lot of the time. But I can remember, you know, saying to that voice in my head, you know, like, you know, would you mind just sort of shutting up? Anyway, no, I don't like you. And then you go, you know, would you? And when I started to get into this, I realized that that voice was my unconscious. And I said to him, would you mind solving this problem? And it sounds like I'm nuts. It sounds like I've got multiple personality disorder. But I said, would you mind solving this problem? And it went, no, you've never asked me before. Why should I do it now? And I went, well, it might be nice if you did. And it said, well, you've never talked to me before. Well, yes, I will do it then. Okay. And it'll go off. And that's kind of a child's way of putting it. But it'll go off and do what you want because you've never asked it to do it. You've always hated it. It's never been your friend. So if you befriend it and say, look, can you do this for me? And it'll go, okay. And off it goes to do it. And this unconscious mind works. It's a bit just like your computer. You put a search term in Google. If you put in goobity gub gub gub, Google's going to go, what the hell was that? But if you put in a nice, decent, specific term, Google knows what you want. And your brain works on linguistics. It doesn't know right or wrong for you. It will actually do things that restrict you because it's about security. And coming back to what we talked about before, there are two identities within each of us. There's something called the shell identity, which is like an autopilot that has doubt, delay, denial, distraction, other mechanisms that keep you on what we call an island of certainty in the sea of eternity. So you don't have to think about anything. Everything's certain. It's A plus B equals C. But if you come off of that island and you start to think a little bit bigger, a little bit wider, then you go into A plus B equals multiple potentials coexisting at the same time. And our job is just to optimize for the one that is the best one for that moment, but always retain agile thinking if new information comes in. Now, most people, when they get an idea, they go, that's the idea. It's the one for life. It's going to solve everything, and stick with the idea. So their thinking becomes that island of solid certainty. And that's a very hard place for someone to exist, because that's when you get the mental disorders. That's when you get the physical disorders, because it's all about suppression. So when we're moving forward, we use a lot of these kind of mental sort of analogies. So people go, oh yeah, I'm getting off the island of certainty. I'm swimming in the sea of eternity. I'm loving it. I'm enjoying it. And I'm just letting my brain just do that flow thinking that the teachers kicked out of you when when they used to say, don't look out the window and daydream. You'll be a failure in life. Yeah, all right. They were just teachers, Sorry, teachers.
Well, they were taught. Right? They were taught to teach us, and then we carry it on, right? They pass us the baton. And so most of us have had that one teacher that we loved because they paid attention to us. And, hopefully we've had that one experience. But yeah, what if we haven't had a good experience and we're 35, 45, 55, 65? Can we turn things around?
Yeah, well, there is a good answer to that, and that is our brains at the age of 60 to 70 are at their maximum function. Most people who are getting the Nobel Prize, they're not in their 21, they're at about 60, 65. So, the number one decade for mental activity is between 60 to 70. The second number one decade, number two decade, it doesn't sound good, does it? Second number one decade. The number two decade is between 70 and 80, and the number three decade is between 50 and 60. So really, life is preparing us. In our world, it's all about looks, it's all about a bit of plastic surgery, this, that, and the other, and everyone's so focused on the visual, they forget the thought. And the thought is what creates this world. And, and all the best ideas come from people who have decided to free their thinking from the norm. Because if you're going to go and, be in the establishment, well, all that's going to do is feed a pyramidal structure of power to the few at the top. As society, we've got to embrace artificial intelligence as something that's going to liberate us and give us the opportunity to become the human beings we were destined and designed to be, not the ones that have just been tapping in a computer for, 40 hours a week. I mean, seriously, is that life? Not really. Not even, that's whatever. Some people might love their jobs, but I think about 80% of people don't like their jobs, 70% don't like their bosses, and that's got to say something about the society we live in, which is not a good one.
Well, it's not God's will. Or maybe it will be my will, and we beg for things to happen in our life. That shouldn't be the thing. We are in control. Come on.
I mean, that's the theological. This is why in quantum psychology and theoretical consciousness, as well as polymathetic training, we go into religion as a subject. And, there's 10,000 religions on the planet currently. Which one do you want to pick? And why do you want to pick it? And each one is a better one than the other one. Now, I wouldn't suggest that because we go into the spiritual side of things. And if you're going to follow a doctrine and say it's God's will, then go and step into God's shoes and see what he's thinking about you and what he's thinking about humanity. A lot of people go, oh, God loves me. Okay, yeah, but why does he love you? Because he does. Because they're looking for that reassurance that somebody loves them, that because everybody's rejected them so far and they can't work out why they've rejected them. And this is what I get to see people in the clinic of why they've been rejected. But really this comes down to a person not having what we call a personal philosophical belief system. Most people don't try to create one or try to understand it or try to work it out for themselves. They'll go to the local church or the local synagogue or the local mosque and just someone will tell them stuff and they'll sit there and absorb the information. And it's just a programming system. I did, actually, funny enough, when I first started on this, I used to think, is this the devil's work you're doing, Kern? Has he got hold of your brain? Is he going to molest you in some way? And you start to investigate the history of the devil and the Bible and stuff like that. And you start to find there's a lot of stuff that you're not told. And that is where you as an individual have to make the choice. You say, you have to make the choice of, do you want to know more or do you want to stay in ignorance? Now, there's two kinds of ignorance. There's the ignorance where you want to remain ignorant so you can get through your life without knowing. And there's a lot of people on the planet like that. I don't want to know what you know. I just want to be happy, but I'm not really. And that's because they don't want to ask questions. The other form of ignorance is what we teach people, is where when you accept your abject ignorance, and in electromagnetic terms, we have access to something like 0.0035% of the electromagnetic field, which is basically we're ignorant to 99.9965%. So that's a huge amount of ignorance. But if you accept your ignorance, it just means your brain, you go, oh, I don't really know anything. And that means your brain can grow by 100%. If you think you know stuff and you're really good and your ego's, really in the ascendancy, and we call this the shell identity, as I said, then you go, well, I know most of what is, I know 90, well, your brain can only grow by 10% then, can't it really? So one of the things in enlightenment, which is an awareness, an ascension, is you've got to keep reminding yourself you know basically nothing. And if you do that, you've got lots of capacity to grow. But people identify themselves with what they know and who they are and this kind of inauthentic social identity that actually by doing so restricts their brain's capacity to grow. And that is a self-defeating structure, which is across society, because society just loves us to be suppressed. And if that can create conflict inside us and give us this idea, like religion gives us idea, and that term you used that I've heard so often, that, if God wills it. I mean, that's in the Muslim religion, they always say, if God wills it, inshallah. And you go, yes, God probably, if I stepped in his shoes, he's probably shaking his head and going, or if he is a he, I don't care. Whatever it is, which is probably us anyhow, he's probably looking at us and going, I'm going to go off for a holiday for a while, leave you guys for a few thousand years before you get some sense into you, start to think for yourself. That would be a good start for humanity. And if we do that, well, we've got a chance of survival. But if we all sit around going, kumbaya, please God save us, and put our hands together, I'm afraid it's not going to be good.
we're going to be disappointed. Just say it. We're just going to be disappointed.
And God's going to go, you know, you didn't want to do anything, you deserved it. I think there's even a parable in the Bible. It says about talents, where one guy buried them in the ground, the other one worked them a bit, and the other one worked them even more. And, you know, the father comes back and talks about that. And if that's not a message from God to say, look, guys, there's a universe, there's a mechanism, but it's a two-way thing. You've got to get the information from the universe and you've got to apply it and use it. Don't just sit there waiting for me to solve all your problems. Because the message and the reason that we're here isn't so we learn crap. It's so we learn our creative and destructive power through the power of choice, which is the thing we humans have. We have choice. And right now we're not exercising it in anywhere near the capacity. Frankly, humanity, it is just so, we call it slow-tarded. Actually, I shouldn't use that word, slow-tarded. And when people come on our calls, we go, look, you're a bit of a slow-tard. Sorry, because you're just not making sense. You're not coherent. You waffle. You're just not precise. You're not in the gamma. You're in the alpha. You're in the beta. It's neuroscience. Your brain's getting smaller. We can see that in front. Dementia's only around the corner. But God will save you, won't he? No, probably not, because he's just fed up with you. He wants you to, he wants to give you a kick up the arse and say, come on, can you guys evolve just a little bit beyond your CVs, your alcohol, your Netflix? Could you just do it, please? No? All right, then. I know what we'll do. We'll make a TV program where you can put God on. That'll be good. And you can watch that instead.
Like I said, it's easier to be on the conveyor belt. And normally we're on the hamster wheel. So the hamster wheel or the conveyor belt, whatever, portal that you're using these days, we're expanding the brain this morning. We're trying to figure out, how does it work? Because most of us don't know. We just take things for granted. We got a new best friend. It is awesome. Kern Frost from across the pond. Right now you can go to councilforhumandevelopment.org or co-createabetterworld.org. If you had 60 seconds to help us memorize better, what would it be? Saying you can do it, or falling into the trap of, no, you can't, you haven't always, so forget about it?
Well, the first thing is to realize that the brain naturally forgets stuff because it can't see the point of holding on to it. But we all, berate ourselves and say, I can't remember stuff. It's doing it because it's an optimized system to forget stuff that it doesn't need. So what's the problem there? The only reason to remember stuff is to be good at a dinner table or a pub quiz. I was going to say, in terms of what would I say to help people that can help people, if you go to co-createabetterworld.org, there is a free book that you can download, which is called Human 3.0, The Great Re-Evolution. It's not long. It's about 30,000 words. It's got schematics, and it's also got QR codes, all the dreaded QR code, that will take you through to some audio tapes that will explain those schematics. It's a good first step into this if it's a subject that you have any remote understanding of. It will literally, well, I'm not saying the book will, but going into mental acceleration will literally change your life, because you'll be thinking so much quicker, creating so much more, and having so much more fun. As we said, not a bad thing to have. Smiling is always good.
Say it with me, everyone. Mental acceleration.
Mental acceleration.
Kern Frost, how could I thank you for saying thank you? Thank you very much. Take a bow. Take a bow. I know this is radio.
Thank you so much for allowing me to be here, Pat. It's really a pleasure to talk to you. And thank you all for listening. Hopefully I've managed to inspire you to do a little bit more, be a little bit more, and change the world, really, because you all can.
We can. All right, go right now. It's co-createabetterworld.org or councilforhumandevelopment.org. I'm going to go to co-createabetterworld.org because that's where the book is, right?
Lots of free resources there, lots of free tapes and stuff like that. You can start to listen to it. And like I said, it's an addictive thing. Once you get into this, nothing on the planet is as good as it, because, all the drugs in the world won't, mind you, as I said, I never take them. But, you want to have that cake and alcohol, keep that in the back. Yeah, nothing wrong with a bit of cake, nothing wrong with a bit of alcohol.
I don't want to let you go, but I gotta.
No worries.
All right, your 1 hour public talk radio is up. That was a good one, right, with Kern? I'm your hostess of the mostest, Francene Marie. Join us next weekend, same time, same station. And until we meet, and one day we will, I want you to have a good week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you for joining us for the Francene Marie Show, where we address issues concerning you and your family. That's all for now. See you next week.
Please do not harm us. We have come to your planet for one thing, the Francene Marie Show. It's the only content we can digest.